In today's world, nations don't conquer with swords and shields anymore. It's all about economic policies, global diplomacy, and, when all else fails, military muscle. Leaders rise and fall based on their decisions, shaping the future of entire countries. But if you think political drama is intense now, imagine taking on the world's greatest superpower, head-on. 2,000 years ago, a Carthaginian general named Hannibal Barca defied Rome, the dominant force of the ancient world, by crossing mountains with an army of men and elephants. That's right, elephants. His military genius and sheer audacity left the Roman Republic shaken to its core. But Hannibal was more than just a bold general. His approach to leadership, discipline, and strategy offers lessons that resonate even in today's chaotic world. So how did he do it? And what can we learn from his tactics?
Yeah, because nothing says, "I'm coming for you," like elephants.
I bet the Romans were just chilling in Italy, sipping wine, when they heard, "Hey, did you guys know Carthage is bringing elephants over the Alps?" They probably spit their drinks.
Honestly, the ancient equivalent of "you up," except it's Hannibal with war elephants.
And Rome's response was probably, well, this escalated quickly.
It's 218 BC. Rome is the rising superpower, and Carthage, Hannibal's homeland, is constantly under threat. Hannibal knows he can't face Rome directly in a conventional battle. Carthage, weakened after the First Punic War, lacked the naval and military resources Rome commanded, forcing Hannibal to rely on unconventional strategies. Rome had the numbers, the resources, and the ability to wage war on multiple fronts. Hannibal, however, understood that a direct confrontation with Rome on open ground would likely end in disaster. So he devised a different, bolder plan. He makes a decision that would go down in history. He'll march his army over the Alps, into Italy itself, to catch Rome off guard. Crossing the Alps with tens of thousands of soldiers, cavalry, and 37 elephants facing hostile tribes, extreme weather, and narrow, perilous paths that often left soldiers and animals on the brink of collapse, wasn't just ambitious. It bordered on the unimaginable. No one had attempted anything of this scale since the mythic Hercules. But Hannibal saw opportunity where others saw disaster. This wasn't just a bold move, it was calculated. He knew that by doing the impossible, he would strike fear into the heart of the Roman Republic. Risk is a crucial part of leadership. Hannibal's march wasn't reckless, it was strategic. He understood the psychology of warfare. He knew that the biggest impact wasn't always made on the battlefield. It started in the minds of his enemies.
Right, because when you're leading an army, why not throw in a few elephants for good measure? Not like the Alps are hard enough.
Honestly, though, it's like, hey, we're already cold and starving. You know what'll really make this trip memorable? Giant animals that belong in the jungle?
It's the ancient equivalent of a road trip where the GPS keeps rerouting you, but instead of missing a turn, you're missing half your army.
Right, and Hannibal's there like, hey, we'll figure it out. Just a few more miles of mountains and we're golden.
Because if you can get war elephants across the Alps, anything else must seem like a breeze.
Crossing the Alps wasn't easy. Hannibal lost almost half his men and many of his elephants. It was a disaster by any measure. But here's where his real leadership shines. Instead of breaking down, Hannibal adapted. He used every setback as fuel to push forward. The conditions were brutal, but Hannibal kept his army together. By the time they emerged from the mountains and into Italy, they weren't just soldiers anymore. They were survivors. After losing nearly half of his army and many elephants to the brutal cold, treacherous mountain passes and hostile Gallic tribes, the men who made it through had been forged in the harshest of trials. They arrived in Italy not just as an army, but as battle-hardened veterans with an unbreakable bond to their leader. And that psychological edge gave them an advantage Rome couldn't anticipate. Hannibal's leadership teaches us that crises aren't just moments of failure, they're opportunities to adapt. The best leaders don't stick to the plan when it's falling apart. They pivot, they evolve, and they keep moving forward. In modern terms, think of it as leading a team through a collapsing startup and emerging as an industry disruptor.
I mean, honestly, if half my workforce disappeared on a mountain hike, I'd probably just call it quits.
Right, but Hannibal, he's like, no worries, we'll make it work. And while we're at it, let's conquer Rome.
It's like if your startup lost half its funding and your office burned down, but instead of panicking, you just say, let's pivot to something even bigger.
Exactly. He turned disaster into an asset. Meanwhile, the Romans are probably thinking, what kind of lunatic survives that and still wants to fight us?
Right. And at that point, the Romans aren't just fighting Hannibal. They're fighting the legend of the guy who crossed the Alps with elephants and didn't give up.
Cannae, 216 BC. Hannibal's crowning achievement. Rome sent a massive army, over 80,000 men, to crush him. Hannibal had less than half that number, but it wasn't about numbers. It was about strategy. Hannibal lured the Romans into a trap, surrounding them on all sides. This tactic of encirclement, where a smaller force envelops a larger one, wasn't just military brilliance. It was the culmination of years of training, discipline, and psychological warfare. Hannibal's plan mimicked the tactics of earlier commanders, like Pyrrhus of Epirus, who had also fought the Romans on Italian soil. But Hannibal perfected it, inflicting one of the greatest defeats Rome ever suffered. The Romans were caught in a deadly vice, and by the end of the day, Rome had suffered one of the worst defeats in its history. It wasn't just brute force that won the day. It was psychological warfare. Hannibal understood his enemy. He knew the Romans' pride and used it against them. He set them up for failure before the first sword was drawn. Leadership isn't just about strength. It's about knowing how to exploit your opponent's weaknesses. Whether in battle, business, or politics, the best leaders know that the mind is the first battleground.
So Hannibal gets the Romans right where he wants them and then casually surrounds them. Classic gotcha move.
It's like telling someone to meet you for a duel and then bringing a trapdoor. Surprise, you lose.
It's like Hannibal read the Roman playbook, made a few edits, and handed it back to them.
Honestly, it's the kind of move that makes you wonder if Hannibal was more of a psychologist than a general.
Or both. I mean, the guy played 4D chess while the Romans were still figuring out checkers.
For 16 years, Hannibal stayed in Italy, winning battles but never marching on Rome itself. Though Hannibal's victories shook Rome to its core, he lacked the reinforcements from Carthage to lay siege to the city. His strategy became one of attrition, weakening Rome's resolve and maintaining a presence in Italy for years. Some say he should have attacked the city directly, but Hannibal knew better. He didn't need to take Rome to win. He was playing the long game, slowly wearing the Romans down, disrupting their economy and undermining their morale. His army became a constant thorn in Rome's side, and he kept them in check for years without risking everything in one decisive battle. In today's world of quick wins and instant results, Hannibal's patience is a lesson in discipline. Leadership isn't just about striking when the iron is hot. It's about knowing when to wait, when to hold back, and when to make your move. In a time where leaders are pressured to show results now, Hannibal's strategy reminds us that sometimes the best move is no move at all.
16 years in enemy territory, never directly attacking Rome. That's like living in your rival's house and never starting a fight. Just eating their food, using their Wi-Fi, and waiting for the right moment.
It's the ultimate power move. I'm not going to fight you, yet, but I could, at any time.
And meanwhile, the Romans are probably losing their minds like, why won't this guy just leave?
It's like Hannibal's greatest weapon wasn't his army, it was his ability to wait. He knew patience was his best strategy.
Honestly, in a world of instant gratification, we could all use a bit of that Hannibal energy.
Hannibal's ultimate defeat came at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. His nemesis, Scipio Africanus, didn't just defeat Hannibal by force. He studied him. He learned from Hannibal's victories, adopting his enemy's own tactics of mobility and surprise, turning them against the master. But here's the thing, Hannibal's defeat didn't erase his legacy. Even in exile, Hannibal continued to influence military strategy and politics. His advisory role in the courts of Hellenistic kings, like Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire, showcases Hannibal's enduring influence across the Mediterranean, even in the face of defeat. His ideas lived on, shaping the way wars were fought for centuries. Sometimes defeat isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new kind of influence. Even in failure, Hannibal proved that a leader's true legacy isn't just in the battles they win. It's in how they change the game for everyone who comes after them.
So, Hannibal loses, but in a way, he still wins. I mean, Rome had to change everything just to beat him.
It's like if your rival finally beats you in a game, but only after copying your entire playbook. Still a win in my book.
Right? And then Hannibal goes off in exile, but he's still out there advising kings, living rent-free in Rome's head.
Exactly. Even in defeat, he was like, "You're welcome, Rome. I just made you better."
True leaders don't just fight battles, they leave legacies that outlast their losses.
Hannibal Barca wasn't just a general. He was a strategist, a tactician, and a philosopher of war. His influence reached far beyond Carthage. Even centuries later, commanders from Julius Caesar to Napoleon would study his campaigns, learning from the man who nearly brought Rome to its knees. His leadership was about more than just winning battles. It was about playing the long game, making bold moves, and knowing when to adapt. In today's world, whether in business, politics, or personal struggles, his lessons still resonate. So, what can we take from Hannibal? Sometimes, the riskiest move is the right one. Sometimes, patience is the greatest weapon. And always, always, outthink your competition.
So basically, lead like Hannibal, take risks, be patient, and if you have to, bring elephants.
Right. And when things go wrong, just remember, you might still change the world.
Join us on an epic journey through time as we explore the lives and legacies of some of history's most legendary leaders, where we offer a deep dive into the figures who shaped the ancient and classical world. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more historical adventures, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode.